Certainly looking forward to the next year and, of course, the next phases of development of gene therapy in hemophilia. I think the most important sort of exciting development, as I see it, would be the commercialization of the first gene therapy product. We anticipate that will happen in 2020. 2020 also will be the year in which we are seeing the very sort of slow evolution of gene editing as opposed to gene therapy. There is a number of preclinical studies that are currently being conducted looking specifically at gene editing for inherited bleeding disorders. And some of us are very excited that, in fact, that will probably be clearer as we approach 2020. I think we are beginning to see basic science being conducted in some of the unknowns in gene therapy. And one would hope that in 2020 we'll start to see some at least answers to those unknown questions. Questions such as why do some patients present with transaminitis whereas others don't? There is exciting preclinical studies that are currently being conducted, and I'm hoping that in 2020 we'll start to have an understanding of the immunology behind that. We are also very excited in 2020 to be able to see if the expression of some of these ongoing studies actually hold. In this particular meeting, a number of updates were made with respect to hemophilia A programs and hemophilia B programs, and one hopes that to get the next update in 2020 on those programs. The initial indications, at least in the data that has been presented, is that we are dealing with sustainable expression in these programs, at least in the majority of these programs.
Well, I think it's clear that at least two programs, one in hemophilia A, one in hemophilia B, are going to wrap up their pivotal phase 3 studies sometime in 2020. We've learned from the BioMarin program for hemophilia A with a AAV5-based vector that they've already submitted a market authorization to the EU. And I would expect that there would likely be also a submission for a biological license application to the FDA sometime very soon. The expectation is that we'll have full results of all the patients who've been dosed sometime in 2020. And I think some of the things that I'm going to be looking for is the overall expression in the phase 3. How does that align with the data we saw from the phase 1/2 program? I think we're going to be interested in the range of expression levels that patients are able to achieve. I think we all recognize there's going to be interpatient variability. That's really hard to tease out when you're, initially looking at maybe a dozen patients, and now you expand to a phase 3 where you have maybe 140 patients. So we want to see what the spread of the variability is, and perhaps what the predictability is for the levels that patients are likely to achieve. The durability, I think we're still going to have to draw from the phase 1/2 program for now, which now is approaching 3 and 4 years out with that program. But I think we will be hopeful that the phase 3 will at least be as good as we've seen from the early programs. The second program that I think we're looking forward to is the results from the phase 3 program from uniQure's AMT-061. This builds on their long-term expression data that they had from the 060 in that AAV5 vector system, and that program is showing good durability over a 3 and 4 year period. The 061 includes a hyperactive factor IX Padua variant, so the levels that patients are achieving from the phase 2 program, phase 2B program, were between 35 and over 50%. So the phase 3 program, I think, is going to be very exciting to see what the results are going to come. This again will be a fairly large trial, well over 100 patients that are fully recruited. Those patients should all complete dosing early in 2020, and I believe later this year in 2020 we'll hear the key results from that phase 3 program. So if both of those programs are achieving the safety and efficacy that we're expecting and hoping for, there's a real possibility that we're going to have 2 commercial hemophilia gene therapies for both hemophilia A and hemophilia B going into 2021. This is going to represent a real paradigm shift and real exciting days ahead for our patients with hemophilia.
2020 is a watershed year for gene therapy in hemophilia. We expect the first product to be approved. So all of these years of work, decades of work toward imagining what it would be like to use gene therapy to cure hemophilia, beginning with the very first concept of gene therapy beginning 50 years ago, is coming to an end at this point. We'll have a product approval likely for factor 8. That should be followed within the next year or two for a factor 9 product approval, and it will change the way hemophilia is treated. There will no longer be as much of a dependence on protein replacement therapy, other alternatives, non-factor therapies. They'll have a role. It will not be a rapid changeover to gene therapy, but we'll see a gradual increase in the number of patients who will decide to pursue gene therapy. And that will foster additional research into other technologies that will be improvements upon this first generation that will be coming to the market.